Thank you. Let's see what we're going to chat about today. Think we can get used to this? Ab1266 shape. What's up with that? Well, I guess we never really talked a whole hell of a lot about that.
No. I think we skimmed over it a little bit briefly, but there's a little nuance there. So we were trying to go for like a two-channel system type sound in a headphone. We also wanted to have a critically damped driver with free air. And so I think the combination of two of those led us to decide that we needed to have some degree of adjustability of how the driver fit on your head. And having it not entirely seal or smash against your head tends to be preferable for that. It solves a few problems, I think. It seemed pretty much mandatory to have some sort of semi-rigid structure, I think, in that situation, to be able to extend the drivers off your head slightly and ensure you don't always have a seal and you have some degree of adjustability about that.
Yeah, we were also kind of shooting for like lack of clamping force too. Like, we didn't want the headphones' weight to be supported by clamping force. It needed to be more of a headband thing, and because it is a fairly headphone, we just didn't want that weight in any way on the ears. It needed to be completely on the top. So I think that was another issue too. Basically the reason why we had to go more horizontal on the top was it's the only way to create a headphone that doesn't clamp. Any curved shape, any other shape, is not going to allow adjustability. It's going to force itself to be more intimate with your head, where this, you can actually spread it out so it is just touching. There's no other way to do it but horizontal. So that's kind of the shape on it. But there's also other factors too, like the way the drivers sit near your ears. The other thing we had to deal with too was we were worried about resonance control. Part of it was isolating any motion of the head or the cranium or the jaw from translating that vibration or anything into the transducer and ultimately your sound. So again, when we looked at the whole structure and said, well, how can we do that? The headband needed to be somehow, for most frequencies, isolated from the frame, and anything that the frame picked up, whether it be in the room or airborne or you're moving your head, had to dissipate. The whole structure had to dissipate through the headband, the tension rings, the aluminum assembly, and vice versa. The drivers are producing vibration, and we didn't want that to affect the sound by basically creating what would be considered somewhat of a cabinet resonance, so to speak. So this whole thing was built to be a fairly rigid structure with absorptive members in all different areas. Kind of unique if you think about it to what most other headphones are built. They're just basically assembled, right?
Most other headphones have very loose assemblies, and I mean that from like a resonance perspective. So the way the driver's mounted, it's almost islanded on its little side, and the headband element doesn't really provide any significant attenuation to vibrations on that island. With our assembly, the entire mass of the assembly helps dampen the driver assembly on each ear cup on each side. And it gives you a much more rigid structure than you would normally see on a headphone. And in turn, it brings the resonant characteristics into a much more desirable space. It's easier for us to be able to compensate for vibrations or resonance in the driver assembly with a more rigid assembly. So this is pretty much more or less a no compromise solution for us. When we were designing 1266, we were looking for a performance optimized design. And so we kind of arrived at a very unconventional shape, but it's intended that way to achieve the additional little gains that we can get wherever possible to improve the sound fidelity.
Yeah, I mean, that whole shape was pretty well tweaked out to do that. What we're doing is we've got a combination of, first of all, I think we brought this up in another video, but you've got to take the driver itself is moving and it's creating vibration at all frequencies, right? Obviously, it's producing music. So you've got to take that resonant and draw it. It's got to go somewhere, okay? So we're drawing it away from the diaphragm. The diaphragm is very light, very thin, and it obviously can be easily distracted, let's say. So same with vibrational energy from your head motion to your head. We created a headband assembly that isolates that from getting at the drivers and potentially creating some sort of sound that's not part of the music. So, but yeah, the gasket materials were a big part of it on the, some of the gasket materials in the assembly, and were required in order to absorb some of this vibrational energy in both directions.
Even down to the cable design, though, we didn't want it to be microphonic or transfer anything into the headphone wireless into it, and that was actually a big goal. And same thing on the our upgraded HP cable, same thing, was microphonics. Even down to the cable design, we were worried about transferring energy into the headphone.
Yeah, some people mention like the stock cable is a little bit stiffer than they'd like. They like it more flexible or whatever. But in part, the reason is because we're using the thinnest jackets we can, on it to protect and yet still protect the conductors inside and so on, and make it sturdy, to hold up over time. But it's the materials we use on it are anti-resonant. If you tap on a part of the cable 3 foot down there, you could tell, you won't even barely hear it at the headphone, right? It's dead. And you can't always do that easily on an extruded type of cable. On our HP cable, the upgraded cable, it's a handmade cable, and so we were able to again choose components and stuff that are very soft, very supple, and even more flexible, and and still get away with having a lack of resonant. And two, think about how our cable plugs into the bottom of the headphone, right? I mean, where's it going? It was solid, basically a mini block of aluminum. which even if the cable does bring some, let's say, very low frequency energy into the head, it's still going to hit fairly rigid and massive structure and just be carried away through the structure, and still, again, with the whole idea or goal that it's not getting at the driver itself and causing it to vibrate or create, an out-of-band energy or something that's not there in the music. So, yeah, there was a lot of thought process going on how to isolate everything from each other and absorb what we can isolate.
And one other thing to note is this is our first headphone we ever made. We had no experience in the headphone industry up until this point. And so we didn't have any preconceived notions about the way a headphone should be made. And so a lot of people look at our headphone, they think, well, this is very unusual. And coming at it from a normal headphone perspective, of course, it is quite unusual. It's made in a very non-typical way compared to the other headphones. But that's simply because we approached it from a performance perspective. We tried to do what we can to mitigate any of the negatives that we saw in other headphones. And we saw the structure as a pretty considerable one with a lot of other headphones. And so we came across with a very atypical result in that. And most of our customers tend to think that the performance speaks for itself in that regard. So maybe
that's one of the reasons we didn't set up any kind of ability to make all these adjustments like gimbals on the sides and stuff, because those are weak links in the chain. They're places that create noise, generate noise. They fail. So one of the premises was to try to avoid any of that stuff. How can we simplify the adjustment of a headphone to one point? And that was really what it was about. It was about trying to we weren't trying to make the most complex design in the world with 100 parts to assemble. We wanted to simplify it and still make it functional and meet all the goals sonically too. So that's what it distilled down to the shape we have now. So
that seems like a good enough place to wrap it up. So as always, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, see more content like this, and leave a comment if you have a question for us. We read all your comments, and we're happy to answer any of your questions you have in a future video. Till next time, take care, guys.
Stay well, everyone.